Now, on April the 21st, 1918, takeoff was delayed due to fog. And as young men are prone to do, especially fighter pilots, they started playing some practical jokes on each other. Now, von Richthofen was in rare good spirits that morning. He had been wounded in the head in July of 1917, the previous year, by a glancing round that was probably fired by one of his own guys, and had since suffered from nausea and headaches, and probably at this stage basically been flying as many as 5 missions a day for about a year and a half, taking some time off for winter. So he was tired. Was he PTSD? Probably to some degree. But it was a foggy morning, and he was in rare spirits, and he had caught one of his squadron leaders, Hans Weiss, a Bavarian, taking a nap on a cot, and had walked up and basically kicked the legs out from his cot and dumped him. Well, Weiss knew his place. He also knew his rank. He also knew his commander's rank, and von Richthofen by this time was a captain, but he knew what he could get away with. And so what he had done, and this picture was taken, you can see this is von Richthofen's Great Dane Moritz. What you can't see really well under this letter L here is a wheel chock. And what Weiss had done to get even is he'd taken a wheel chock and he tied it to the neck of the Great Dane. And von Richthofen evidently had just discovered Moritz and freed him because the wheel chock's sitting on the ground. And there's some discussion about this not being April the 21st because the triplane in the background still had the old Gothic crosses on it, but several of our experts say that it was probably a replacement plane that had just come from the factory and they had had the old crosses on it. So this was most definitely the morning of April the 21st, 1918. Gentleman he's talking to is Erich Lowenhart, who is the squadron leader of Jasta 10, was also the fourth highest scoring ace in the German Air Force. Died trying to parachute in 1918. And I had the question earlier about whether or not the Germans wore parachutes. They did as of 1918. The Allies never did. And that's always a big discussion, especially about when you start talking about how the RAF leadership handled some of their resources. So anyway, they were waiting to take off when this happened. Von Richthofen was flying this particular aircraft. This is Fokker DR-1 425-17, a triplane. And the triplane was interesting because the triplane came about because when the elite squadrons were flying up in Belgium, a lot of times they were coming up against British naval squadrons. The British naval squadrons had the Sopwith triplane. And it was very effective in combat. Could climb really well, turn quick, was nothing but pure lift and pure wing chord. So anyway, von Richthofen is flying 425-17. Where am I? Okay, 425-17. Sported a 110 horsepower Oberrussel, which was basically a copy of the French 110 Leron engine. Maximum speed, this says 115. Most guys will tell you it was 110. It wasn't a fast airplane. Too much wing surface, too many wings. A 1916 engine even at that point. Endurance, 1 hour, 30 minutes. Service ceiling, 20,015 feet. 23 feet, 7 inches in length. 18 feet, 13 inches in width. Height of about 9 feet. Weight, 1,291 pounds. Very light plane, armed with 2 forward-firing Spandau machine guns. So anyway, the fog lifts. And they take off basically west along the Somme River. And their mission for the day is to patrol the front and look out for enemy reconnaissance aircraft that were going to be trying to photograph their side of the front. But also their secondary mission was to find an artillery battery on a place called Morlancourt Ridge. And that'll play a role in what we're going to talk about further here. So anyway, this is the front line basically, and I'd like to thank the League webmaster Bonnie Ritchie for showing me how to use Google Earth. The front line at this time basically traversed the river, ran along here between Sailly-Lorette and Sailly-le-Sec, France. If you want to kind of pinpoint this area, go to France, find a map, look for the city of Amiens, and go northeast from Amiens towards a town called Albert. And this area is basically just to the right, about halfway to Albert from Amiens, along that particular road. So the front line ran along here, and Le Hamel was actually an ammunition dump. And Yasta 11 or JG1 came from this direction over here along the river, and arriving over Salle-Lorette saw that there were two RE-8 reconnaissance aircraft, much like this one, trying to photograph the ammo dump. Okay, I have plane specs for you. Okay, the RE-8 was, RE stood for Reconnaissance Experimental. Plane was built by the Royal Aircraft Factory, and as I was explaining to somebody earlier, Royal Aircraft Factory planes were all ended in E for experimental. The BE was the Blériot Experimental. The SC-5, which was a very successful fighter aircraft in World War I, stood for Scout Experimental. And then you had the RE-8. Slow, steady, a photography aircraft, 140 horsepower RAF 12-cylinder V-piston engine, maximum speed of 98 miles an hour, endurance 4 hours 30 minutes, service ceiling 11,000 feet. It didn't need to get high. The idea was to be low enough to take good pictures. 42 feet long, 27 feet wide, height of about 11 feet. One forward firing Vickers belt-fed machine gun, one drum-fed Lewis machine gun on the tail there. So two of these planes are hovering over Hamel, trying to take pictures. Von Richthofen and Hans Weiss separate from the group and attack them. These two planes were flown by veteran pilots who were from the Australian Flying Corps. These guys had been around before. They knew how to protect each other. They went into defensive maneuvers. Von Richthofen made a couple of attacks and had a double feed on his left gun, so he broke off. Weiss made one other fairly aggressive attempt and wound up getting fairly shot up for his trouble, and he broke off. The RE-8s headed back for home, and Von Richthofen and Weiss flew back towards the Somme River to meet back up their squadron. Now this is, Saïd Lasek is actually behind these trees, so they were basically just off the picture here attacking the two RE-8s, and they came back over here and rejoined their squadron. Now about the time they met up with their guys, and I'm sure Manfred was trying to figure out why his machine gun wouldn't work, along comes the Sopwith Camels of 209 Squadron, which had been a former naval squadron, because on March the 1st, 1918, the Royal Naval Air Service and the Royal Flying Corps joined to form the RAF. So if anybody ever asks you when the RAF was started, March 1st, 1918. Now, among those Sopwith Camels on his second combat mission was Lieutenant Wilfred Wap May of Edmonton, Alberta, Canada. Like many flyers of the period, he started out in the infantry and then joined the RFC. And he's pictured here in front of a quadrone trainer after graduating from flight school, and I think he learned to fly at Hendon, which is now the site of the RAF Museum outside of London. 209 Squadron had taken off from an airfield at Bertangle, which is just north of Amiens. And this is actually a picture of 209 Squadron on that particular airfield. These are their aircraft, probably taken within a week or so of the date that we're talking about here. And the previous picture and this picture were provided to me by Wap's son, Denny May, who's still alive in Edmonton and is a member of our group. He's a great man. He's really kind of dedicated his latter years to talking to people about his dad's legacy and the role that his dad had in this day. But these are the Sopwith Camels of 209 Squadron. This is the plane that Wap was flying, Sopwith Camel. I asked Denny who Lucy was, and maybe it was a Peanuts reference or something like that, but he assured me it wasn't. But anyway, Sopwith Camel was one of two planes that had really turned the tide for the Royal Flying Corps, Royal Air Force after Bloody April was over. The other one was the SE-5, as I mentioned. Sopwith Camel power plant was a 130 horsepower Clerget 9-cylinder air-cooled rotary piston engine. Rotary engine, the engine and the prop turned. Oil fueled, they burned castor oil. There was no oil pump, it was a direct feed, and so the oil went in, the oil went out, and then it went all over the pilot and the plane. And I'm sure air combat wasn't enough motivation to meet certain constitutional needs during the day, but just in case, there was always the castor oil bath you got when flying one of these aircraft. Maximum speed, 117 miles an hour. It's about right, 115. Endurance, 2 hours, 30 minutes. Serviceable ceiling, 19,000 feet. Dimensions, let's see, 28 feet wingspan, 18 feet in length, height about 8 feet. So anyway, on this day, May was flying this plane, and his squadron leader was this man, a friend of his actually from pre-war Canada, Arthur Roy Brown of Toronto. Now, like a lot of squadron leaders, Brown was a very careful man. He was an ace. He was suffering the definite effects of post-traumatic stress disorder. He used to routinely be physically ill after a mission. And like a good flight leader, he knew he had a rookie. And he told him, here's what you do. Stay in formation. If we get in a scrap, stay above it. If somebody comes after you, head for home. Now, there's few people in here who've led combat formations. When do the rookies ever do what you tell them to do? Okay, so you know where this is going to go, right? So anyway, Brown tells him that. And so they're basically in a dogfight over Sailly-le-Sec right here. May's above the fight, he's circling, no one's really noticed him. He's above the fray. The guy's the turning fight. Of course, it's sinking fast, and they go from 8,000 to 5,000 feet in almost no time. Triplane comes out to gain some altitude, rolls back over, goes back into the pile. May's tempted. And this is how Denny told me how it came down when he talked to his dad about it once. Another triplane comes up. It's light blue. Wop can't stand it. Rolls over, down he goes. Now, he made two mistakes. One is he didn't do what his squadron leader told him. But the second and bigger mistake he made was that the plane he chose out was flown by a young man by the name of Wolfram von Richthofen. Yes, there's a relation. Guess who was watching out for his rookie pilot, who also happened to be his cousin? Manfred von Richthofen. Manfred von Richthofen, being the kind of ace he was, had very good situational awareness. He took a look at the way that May dove on him. He knew he had a rookie, and he was on him. May said that after he blew the pass, he started to think about climbing out, and he already heard machine gun fire. He just kept going to the deck. Okay, so May gets down to the surface of the Somme River, right around Sailly-le-Sec. Well, guess who had seen all this too? Captain Roy Brown. Captain Roy Brown, a little late to the party, a little farther off where May and von Richthofen were, sees them heading towards the ground, realizes he's going to have to intercept, and basically somewhere in this area here comes from an angle. They're traveling this direction. He comes across and he gets basically one quick deflection shot. And keep in mind, deflection shooting was in its infancy then. Von Richthofen never really did it. He considered it a trick. He was a guy who lined up on year 6 and hosed it.